Looking at arousal now. One definition for arousal is that arousal is a blend of physiological and psychological activity in a person, and it refers to the level of motivation, alertness, and excitement at a particular moment. Weinberg and Gould, 2007. Another definition for arousal is that arousal is a general physiological and psychological activation varying on a continuum from deep sleep to intense excitement. Weinberg and Gould 2007 as well. I think from here it's good to understand that both definitions both use this combination of physiological and psychological components, which then works together to make this arousal. It's also interesting to say that they are on a continuum from deep sleep to intense excitement, with all three of our diagrams we're going to look at and theories we're going to look at later on all include this continuum, but in different ways. Firstly, the inverted U theory. This refers to this diagram here, where from low arousal, which is like deep sleep, as arousal increases, performance increases until an optimum level. And then once arousal increases even more to over-arousal, or where they're hyper-aroused, performance then begins to decrease once again. This is likely to be for Nick, as represents Nick's personality, as Nick is feeling nauseous before games, and this suggests that then he is over-aroused. And if he's over-aroused, then his performance drops, which is why he struggles to play well and apply his tactics in the games, because his performance is dropped because he is over-aroused. Also looking at Neidfer's 1976 theory of attention fields, this links with the inverted U theory, meaning that it suggests that when you are low or under-aroused, your attention field is too broad. You have a very wide attention field. And when you are at optimum, your attention field is moderate. So at optimum point. But first, looking at the broad attention field, an example for this would be, let's say Nick was under-aroused. Nick would be taken in the crowd and his surrounding environment when he doesn't need to, when he really needs to focus on the game. At his optimum, Nick would then be focusing on the player, where the player is on the court, and the shuttlecock, where that is for him to then play his shots accordingly and tactically to get the point. But for Nick, as he's over-aroused, his attention field is suggested to be too narrow, meaning that this is why he could be struggling to play those more precise shots, as his attention field is so short or so narrow that he's only really focusing on the shuttlecock, potentially not focusing on his opposition, so he doesn't really know where his opposition is on the court, meaning that he's going to struggle playing precise shots as he doesn't know where to play it. It also, looking at scenario 1, it says that if he makes an error, his performance falls apart. And this really shows that if he makes an error, his arousal is likely to either increase or stay the same, so it's not going to decrease. And it's either going to stay the same here or increase, so that his performance will decrease even more, which is why his performance is likely to fall apart as his arousal increases. Just going back and looking at the inverted U theory again, potential criticisms of this theory suggest that it's a progressive and gradual increase and a gradual decrease. But if Nick makes a mistake and then it says his performance falls apart, so surely there should be a drastic change in performance here compared to arousal. And this here doesn't really take that into account. And you can also look at this with elite performance when there's a lot of pressure, like for Nick, if he was in like a huge tournament and he had to win his shot to stay in the game, for example, then there will be so much pressure on him to do well that his arousal will then increase, and then he could obviously mess up his shot completely because he is so over aroused. But he'd been playing amazingly throughout the entire game, and because of that pressure that he has to do well, this could cause a massive drop in performance, which the inverted U theory doesn't take into account for. Ways to control arousal, as for Nick, he will want to decrease his arousal to get back to that optimum level. So somatic ways, so this is the physiological ways to control arousal, would be breathing control. This is where performers like Nick focus on their deep breathing to relax and reduce arousal levels. And this could also help to reduce muscle tension, for example, as he's trying to focusing on relaxing himself and therefore relaxing his muscles as well as reducing arousal levels. And what's good about this is that it's an extremely simple method that we can use anywhen during a match, before a match. He can do this either before a match to reduce his arousal levels before he comes onto the court, or he can do it during the court as, for example, breaks between little rallies and sets. He can do this before he serves, for example, to control his arousal, so then he can play to his optimum ability. Cognitive way to control arousal, so this is the psychological way controlling arousal, would be imagery, for example. And this is when you mentally picture successfully completing a task. So, for example, if Nick wanted to do a smash, for example, or an ace on his serve, he would mentally picture this in his mind before taking that serve. And so that means his arousal would decrease and then get back up to optimum levels as he is more confident in knowing how to do this. And this can be used to recall a desired outcome or previous successful outcome, for example, in training. So where his new coach has been giving him extra coaching and different tactics to develop his game, if he used imagery here, he can look back at those training sessions where he learned those tactics and applied those tactics, so then he can apply those tactics into his games against other people, not just in training.